Welcome back to Orange Hat Reviews, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, my friend Jorge Arenas, who writes for Bounding into Comics, sent me a link to a article, one that I find particularly interesting and worthy of a live stream, because also it would have been way too long to be put in a video. I like to keep my videos short and sweet. So this one's definitely worthy of a live video. So if you love Star Wars and absolutely care about Star Wars like I do, you should definitely pay attention to what I am going to say when it comes to the Disney Story Group out of one of their own mouths about the importance of canon. Now, for those of you who don't know what canon is, small crash course. Canon is basically what is established as the true story. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. Star Wars Group member Matt Martin recently declared that fans can pick and choose what is canon in Star Wars because it's all fake anyway. There's a lot wrong with that. But if you really want to go there, Mr. Matt Martin, fine, Disney's not canon. Now, as reported by Disney Star Wars is Dumb, shout out to Ichibaka, by the way, he's a great guy. Martin's most recent comments came after a fan asked him to clarify his previous comments regarding Star Wars canon. Martin has discussed Star Wars in canon in length. Back in April, he responded to a fan when asked about treating the old GT version of Clone Wars as canon, GT being Genndy Tartakovsky. He wrote, "I'm of the mind that you can consider anything you want canon if it makes you happy." There's so much that is wrong with what he just said. For the most part, it still works, but there are some contradictions with other storytelling if you really care. Seriously? I am a person that cares deeply about the stories I read and watch and whatnot. So I'm going to say that if the person who is part of the story group that is responsible for continuing the legacy of Star Wars says that you should not care about how the story goes or if it has inconsistencies, then they should not be allowed to do the story. They should not be allowed to even touch Star Wars with their pen or pencil or whatever their writing medium is. If you are going to say that inconsistencies and mistakes of an absurd and obscene amount of levels is okay, then you, sir, should not have a job in that particular area. You see, the old story group, before Disney got their money-grubbing claws on Star Wars, people like Karen Travis, Timothy Zahn, James Luceno, and many others, they all did roundtables very frequently when they were all doing the story groups. And one of the things that they always had a habit of doing was making sure that they went back into the old stories, into the older books, to make sure that they didn't change something by accident. Yes, there were a couple of mistakes. Yes, there was a couple of inconsistencies. But you know what? They actually repaired them in a way that made sense. They cared enough so that the story could continue as smoothly as possible. And if these Disney Star Wars creators are saying that it doesn't matter, we're just telling telling our versions of the story, and if it doesn't work, well, it doesn't matter because what you like, and what we don't, we don't. Or what we like, we like. That's not how it works. Let's continue, shall we? Earlier in April, he shared an article from IO9 which declared our fascination with canon is killing the way we value stories. No, it's called we want it to be consistent. So if it's not consistent and continuous, it harms the story. Anyway, he says, yes, everyone should read this. It's a much more articulate way of discussing something I've often tried to crunch down into 280 characters on Twitter. There's 280 character limit. Or give frustratingly vague answers to many questions thrown my way here on Twitter. In the article, James Whitbrook, the writer of that, or of the IO9 article, this craving for canon above all else is a toxic attitude. So now it's toxic to want a good, continuous, and consistent story. So you're going to call us problematic and toxic for wanting Star Wars to be good. Okay, not a good way of expressing that. Not just the way we talk about pieces of media from the critical perspective, but in fan circles as well. There we go, hitting after the fans. It's kind of expected with Disney at this point. He elaborates, the hunger for facts above all else leads to things like filler episode becoming a derogatory term for stories that don't advance the larger ongoing plot of a narrative or don't include some narrative or don't include some shocking new revelation that someone can add to a list. Whitbrook goes on to write, the need robs discussions about the stories we get from nuance and interpretation. Because who cares what you think happened when there's an answer from the Word of God to that question you might have had. Well, I'm sorry, I prefer to actually have an answer ready in order to know, or if I have a question, especially when it comes to Star Wars. You see, by having those answers, yes, it leaves less to interpretation, but it also gives you a solid ground to go off of, you know? Ugh. And more sinisterly, beyond the way it shapes our discourse, it's a craving that further enmeshes our love for a world, not to the world itself, but to the masters behind that world. In discussing the article, Martin declared canon should be an added bonus, but not the be-all or the end-all be-all of a story. This guy should not be allowed to even touch a Star Wars story. I'm sorry, he shouldn't. The EU is no less good now than it was before due to the fact that it's no longer canon. The EU is one of the greatest universes I have read, aside from even greater universes that came from the Tolkien estate, because they cared enough to stay consistent, you see. That didn't change the stories. So then they show him, or tweet here from some guy, Sean Ferguson. You're right. The two different continuities issue is a problem, but I think that's a separate issue. I don't think fans should dump anything not designated as canon, but I do have to admit then canon gives me, or I'm guessing that canon gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling. Typo, I guess. And Matt Martin would reply, that's it. Canon should be an added bonus, but not the end-all be-all. I just read that part. More recently, Martin was asked about canonizing the original animated Battle of Coruscant. He responded, I personally don't really see the point of recanonizing things. If that version doesn't contradict anything, pretty sure it's clear, then Anyone who likes it can consider it as a part of their Star Wars story, but it leaves open the opportunity to retell it in the future. He would add, fans generally put too much emphasis on what the companies deem official. No, we don't. If you like the animated version, I do. The writer, John Trent, says that. I do. Then there's no reason to value it less because it's not canon, you know? Oh, that's slightly a good point. Martin would then be questioned about these comments, with one fan asking for some clarity. Martin answering, or let's go to the question here, by this Mark Langston guy. But I also do that knowing very well that if Star Wars were theoretically real, those would not be actual events, sort of fiction within fiction. Is that not accurate? Thanks. He said, or then Matt Martin would respond, I think the point that I was making was that what is and isn't canon informs how future stories may be told, but it doesn't need to dictate how individual fans enjoy their own personal Star Wars story. He added, so an example earlier, the person was talking about recanonizing a past story since the specific story hasn't been explored in the new canon. And I said if they like that story, there's no reason they can't accept it as real in their version of Star Wars. That's the problem. If there's no officiality to Star Wars, then how is canon canon? Honestly, how is canon canon? He continued, but if there was an opportunity to tell that story now, that new creator would not be beholden to that old version of the story. Let me read that again. But if there was an opportunity to tell that story now, the new creator would not be beholden to that old version of the story. Well, the problem is sometimes the older version happens to be the better version. You know what I'm saying? Martin then summarized, so to summarize, there is a reason that we need to intentionally know what is and isn't canon so we can keep our line of official storytelling as aligned as possible. But that doesn't mean fans can't individually pick and choose what they want to accept as true. Bullshit! Consistency matters. Canon matters. I mean, yes, Disney canon is now the official canon, but it is so riddled with inconsistencies and errors and whatnot that it is a hot mess. People have been gravitating more towards the EU legends as their canon because it's consistent, precise, continuous, and smooth flowing. You don't see that very much in this Disney Star Wars. I can point out inconsistencies and contradictions all day when it comes to Disney. Folks, I literally could go 24 hours and do it if I wanted to. Not going to because I only got a 20-hour limit on my StreamYard. Martin then noted, it's all fake anyway, so you can't choose to accept whatever you want as part of the story. So basically, if you choose to only accept the real official canon, cool. If you like to mix and match between continuities, cool. I don't. If you like to make up your own stories, also cool. Okay, I can agree with that premise, but I would like the official canon to actually still be good. You know what I'm saying? And I will get to the chat in a little bit, folks. Please just be patient. This looks like Martin is just making excuses for Disney's abomination of a sequel trilogy. Very true. The trilogy that utterly ruined Luke Skywalker and turned him into a man who premeditated the attempted murder of his nephew. The trilogy that fundamentally changed Luke from a man who was willing to sacrifice his life in order to save the soul of his father from the dark side, and turned him into a coward would-be murderer hiding on a remote island that allowed his nephew's soul to become corrupted by the dark side. Martin's statement about the stories being fake anyways doesn't make sense. Yes, the story is fantasy, but the stories are real. And the world George Lucas created with his imagination was brought to life on the big screen. A world that set about showing us a number of rules. Many of those rules were thrown to the wind. Jedi now use Force lightning. Force ghosts are physically interacting with the world. Ships are able to hyperspace ram other ships. As Martin states, you can choose the Star Wars canon you want to believe in, but that doesn't mean the canon you choose to believe is actually the true one. It's like saying Sauron won at the end of Lord of the Rings because I choose to believe it. Whatever J.R.R. Tolkien wrote be damned. It's what I want to believe, of course. That's basically what he's saying. You could change it and make whatever you think official canon. That's not how it works, folks. This type of thinking appears to permeate Lucasfilm and Star Wars given the products they've given us over the last few years. Hardly any of it matches up with the story that turned Star Wars into a cultural phenomenon. Instead, Star Wars is now a sad shell of itself due to people like Martin. People who are supposed to be guiding Star Wars just not caring because it's all fake anyway. Or even more sinister, people who want to use Star Wars to inject their own agenda into it. The past is dead, kill it if you have to. It's all fake anyway. Makes a lot more sense now. What do you make of Martin's comments regarding canon and Star Wars? I think Martin should be fired from the Star Wars creative groups, folks. And anybody who agrees with him that works for the story group should also be fired. They have just basically expressed, well, Martin did anyway, he doesn't care about consistency and canon. He'll write his own story and consider it canon. That's not how it works. Just because something is bad, well, okay, think of something better and that could be your canon. How about you do your goddamn job on a professional level so that kind of stuff doesn't have to happen and you divide the fan base. You know, like Roundhead Johnson did. You know, like J.J. Abrams did. And these comic writers that made Episode 7 inconsistent with their own canon. I mean, folks, if you call yourself a Star Wars fan, meaning you have at least seen the movies, then you know the kind of character Luke Skywalker is in the original trilogy. This is not the kind of character he would have been in the Disney trilogy. I'm not even going to call it the sequel trilogy. It's not sequels. It's corporate fan fiction. Because that's not who Luke Skywalker was. He wouldn't have tried to murder Kylo Ren or Ben Solo simply for him having... It's like that damn meme. There's still good in my father. I can save him. And then right below it, Disney version. This son of a bitch is having bad dreams. Time to die. Yeah, it makes no sense. Now, let's get to the chat. Sorry, folks. Junebug, how you doing? Star Wars Legends canon, whatever you want to call it, or you want to collect, has a lot more impactful stories than anything Star Wars has ever pulled out of Mary Sue Palpatine. It's not a compelling story. You're damn right. You are damn right. You're absolutely right, Junebug. Did the Disney screenwriter ever hear of Hero's Journey? And even these other writers who are writing for Star Wars now? Yeah. How you doing, Jay God? Good to see you. Yeah, the fans generally don't care about Star Wars anymore other than the Mandalorian Disney Plus series. That's sort of true. I mean, as much as I like the Mandalorian, I can still acknowledge that it's not well done. I mean, Jon Favreau did care a lot about Star Wars and making it Star Wars, not this crap that Disney has been doing. but at least he tried. Hiring Leslie Headland for a female-centric Star Wars TV show is a stupid-ass idea because we all know this woman is going to inject her radical toxic feminist agenda in the story, ruining the show. Yes, she is. She is going to turn it into something that Star Wars is not. Star Wars is not about gender, race, or sexuality. Star Wars is about a theme of good versus evil, and yes, have a little romance and action and maybe even revenge mixed in. It's not about gender. It's not about who's the better gender. It's not about who's the better, or it's not about sexuality. It's not about any of that. It's about telling a good story. Everybody tells Martin to have a Disney. Everybody tell Martin to have a Disney day. In Disney code, that means F you or fuck you when they say that at the pardon my French, or when they say that at the pardon my French. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, folks, as this article clearly illustrates, you gotta be consistent with what you're doing in telling us a story. Otherwise, you're just gonna piss off fans even more than they have already been pissed off. J.J. Abrams started something that had potential in Episode 7, but it did not age well due to Disney's constant screw-ups within their own story group. They created a canon where a comic where Kylo fights a Zillo beast and manages to best it where Vader could not. And this took place before Episode 7, but in the movie Episode 7, or because, well, in the comic, before I get to that, in the comic, an old clone who still wore his old stormtrooper outfit basically said, you know how it wasn't a competition between you and Vader? Well, you won. Which gave Kylo Ren a serious boost in ego and confidence that he was better than Vader. Well, then, why was there that part where Rey reaches right into Kylo's head while he's mind raping her and says, you're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader? And he recoils because she just reached and found his deepest, darkest fear. You see, there's an inconsistency there. The entire character of Luke Skywalker in Episode 8 is an inconsistent and contradictory character. But Rian Johnson loves to subvert expectations. So he's allowed to do that, well, because that's his way of doing things. No. What you do is you keep Luke as a symbol of hope, because that is what he was in Star Wars. He was a symbol of hope and redemption. So for the story group, Matt Martin in particular, to say, if you don't like our canon, well, think of your own canon, and that's your official canon. Well, okay, fine. Disney Star Wars is not my canon, and it never will be official canon. How about that? Legends is official canon. Star Wars Clone Wars, not canon. Star Wars Rebels, not canon. Star Wars Mandalorian, not canon. Sorry, I prefer the Karen Traviss model of Mandalorians, not this crap that they got going on in Disney. And from Filoni, and blaspheme I say it, George Lucas himself, where George Lucas said that Jango Fett and Boba Fett were not Mandalorians. I'm sorry, I will fight him to the death on that. Lucas made the biggest mistake when he decanonized the Mandalorian heritage of Fett and the Fett clan. Yes, he was born on Concord Dawn. Yes, his parents were murdered. And yes, he was adopted by the Mandalorian community. But he was a Mandalorian, damn it. So yeah, I will always fight George Lucas on that one thing. And EU is always going to be my canon, because that's where the best stories were or came from. How you doing, Happy? Good to see you. Happy day. And Junebug. And Disney canon is for pussies. I will disagree with that. You see, I have friends who like the Disney canon, and I am not going to fault them for liking it. They are allowed to like what they want to like. I'm never going to tell them otherwise. You are allowed to like what you like, but at least have the consistency and at least have the self-respect for your own observational skills to understand when something is not right about something that you love. Star Wars episodes 7, 8, and 9 are considered canon now. Well, if people enjoyed them, fine. But at least have the respect to say they were heavily flawed and it makes no sense. Because it doesn't, folks. It really doesn't. I mean, the only thing that I truly liked out of Star Wars from Disney is Rogue One. I find it to be an acceptable, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but an acceptable story that fills in a question, or that answers a question that I've had since I was very young, which was, what was the first real victory the rebellion had against the Empire? The Battle of Scarif tells that battle. And it's acceptable to me. That's my own personal opinion. Yes, I know that Rogue One was a hot mess. Yes, I know that its saving grace was the Vader scene at the end. But I'm telling you now, the rest of Disney Star Wars, no, it doesn't work. Not even Solo works. I'm sorry. Solo had a lot of spirit, but the personal agenda stuff that they put in, where Solo's pretty much a dick, and you got a freaking droid that is agenda-driven, saying free everyone, free the slaves, or droids should not be slaves, and all that shit. And Han Solo being, or not Han Solo, but Lando Calrissian being pansexual. Even Billy D. Williams had a problem with that. How you doing, Riot? It's good to see you. If you're just joining, you're going to have to catch most of it on the replay, because I just went over the article from Bounding into Comics from the Star Wars Story Group, and how they say that whatever canon you want to be canon, you can have it as your official canon. That's not how canon works. I just hope Disney doesn't ruin Indiana Jones. I'm not a close-minded Indiana Jones fan, because different actors have played Indy. The franchise have had their have been 5 actors. Yeah, that's true. There has been. And you know what? That's okay. I'm not going to ever fault anybody on liking something I don't like. Hell, the thing is, I actually do find Rise of Skywalker to have a small bit of entertainment value. But that movie still doesn't make sense, and it still is flawed as all hell. I can still say that there are movies in my own past that I absolutely think are very good movies, like Howard the Duck. Movie is cringe as hell in some areas, but I still like it. Now, the Disney canon being compared to Legends canon. If you compare Disney canon, you are going to be comparing a mess of contradictions and inconsistencies to a canon, Legends in this case, that was very smooth. Yes, there were some bumps along the way, but for the most part, it was smooth, it was consistent, it was concise, it worked. Anyway, folks, I just wanted to do this live video, and I am very happy that many of you guys have come. Sorry, right? You did kind of pick it up at the ending of it, but I do thank you for dropping by. It's always a pleasure to have you in my chat and sometimes on my stream. But anyway, I am going to start wrapping it up here, folks. For anybody catching this on the replay, y'all know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Check out my latest video before this video, basically giving my thoughts on Hollywood and their perceptions of how the world should be, and them demanding that world governments restructure themselves to their whim. That's actually gotten a lot of traffic recently. That's actually one of my most liked videos almost so far. So if I can get some more views and likes on that one, it would be great. I did my best not to swear, but my thumbnail does have the mother effer word in it, but it is censored. One letter is censored, but it's still, the first cut that I did of that video was very laced with profanity, but I decided to make it less so and less of a rant and more of a logical thing. Slightly political, yes, but still, I thought it was a well done video myself. And sometimes I really don't do that good of videos because most of my other previous videos are like 3 or 4 likes, 4 likes, maybe 5 likes here, and not a lot of views. This one's actually gaining a lot more attention. So anyway, folks, that is going to be the video. Stay tuned for not this Friday, but next Friday's versus stream. It's the big one. We're probably going to have OG Star Wars Ryan Kinnell, the same panel again, plus possibly Lethal Lightning, where we discuss Emperor Palpatine from Legends versus Emperor Vitiate from Legends. So definitely stay tuned for that. It's always Friday night Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. And if you guys want to, or if I see you in the chat, I'll definitely highlight your comments, because this one I also want the chat to be engaged in as well, so you guys can give your opinions on it and whatnot. Anyway, folks, oh, and 2 weeks after that one, and I will say this, thank you to Jane Theory, because she did a silly thing where she tagged me, this should be your next versus stream, where it was Rey versus somebody, Rey Palpatine, and I'm like, she's not even worthy enough to be on one of my versus streams. But you know what? The more I thought about it, it's like, I should put her on just so she can get her ass kicked. So 2 weeks after the Emperor versus Emperor is going to be daughters of emperors versus each other. So you're going to have Rey Palpatine versus Empress Valen from the Old Republic game. Both incredibly powerful, but which one is more powerful? And I think we all know the answer to that. But definitely stay tuned for that one as well. And I'm going to have Jane Theory on that, because she was the one who actually inspired that one. So yeah, folks, definitely stay tuned for the versus streams. I hope you all are enjoying them. I actually have them now on a playlist. If you go to my channel, go to playlists, look for versus streams. You can check out all my versus streams that I have had there. And I truly hope that you enjoy them all. Anyway, folks, this is going to wrap it up. You all know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, what you think of the comments and such made by the story group writer Matt Martin for Disney Star Wars. Also, I nominated myself and Stig Kenobi for the next round of Fandom Menace cards, not the round that's currently going. I voted for Supreme Heretic for that one. But definitely, after this round of all 4 of these guys getting their cards, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. So stay tuned. Vote for me and Stig when we're put out in the next one. And anyway, folks, this has been Orange Hat Reviews. Stay humble.